Tex McIver spent the day golfing with his wife Diane. Afterwards, they went back to their ranch home in Putnam County, where Diane's friend Danny Joe Carter was spending the weekend with them. At the end of the day, all three headed back to Atlanta in the McIver's SUV. Danny Joe was driving because Diane and Tex had been drinking wine. Diane was in the front passenger seat and Tex was in the back seat. When they got to downtown Atlanta on the connector, they hit traffic, so they took the Edgewood exit. As they got off the road, Tex was concerned about the neighborhood they were in, so he asked Diane to hand him his gun from the console. They continued driving up Piedmont Road, and somewhere between 12th and 14th Street, the gun went off. The bullet traveled through the front passenger seat and struck Diane. She died the next day at the hospital. Tex McIver says it was an accident, but prosecutors say it's murder. This is the trial of Tex McIver. Huge day inside the courtroom. The judge allowed the jury to take a look at the SUV and get inside the SUV, the same one that Tex McIver was in when he shot and killed his wife, Diane. No cameras were allowed there, but our photographer, Jefferson, was there as the jury was watching. Describe the scene for us.
All right, we're in a concrete sally port where they bring in prisoners.
What was the process? How did they do it?
The jurors went up one at a time. Each juror took about a minute and a half. Some jurors took as long as 2 minutes. Some got in all 4 doors. Some only got in 2 doors.
They were allowed to sit in each of the 4 seats.
Yes.
Any notable reaction from any of the jurors?
No, it just seemed like they were just looking at another car.
So now the jury clears out and then the media is allowed to examine the SUV?
Absolutely.
What struck you about what you saw inside?
Follow the dowel. Because of the placement of the armrest with the door closed, it would have been impossible for you to have the gun like this and match up with the dowel. But if you turned your hand either like this or the other way, laying it flat like this, either side, it matched up perfect.
The defense version and explanation of how that gun had to be was consistent with your own examination of the scene.
I saw it. Yeah, I saw the whole thing. Yeah, it was perfect.
What happens next if Tex McIver is found guilty? If Tex McIver is found guilty, the first thing that would happen in the courtroom is a decision about whether or not his bond gets revoked, because he's facing life in prison either with or without parole. So at that point, where does Tex McIver go? Pending his sentencing, pending his appeal. That's where the legal battle will be between the defense and the prosecution. Obviously, prosecutors will want him locked up immediately, and the defense will do whatever they can to try to keep him out until sentencing and then keep him out until the appeal is heard. Both of those very unlikely. What happens next if Tex McIver is found not guilty? Game over for prosecutors. Tex McIver will walk out of that courtroom a free man and will never be able to be charged with those counts, with those allegations ever again. Jeopardy attaches. You can't try the same person twice for the same crime. Tex McIver will be free. What are the possible outcomes for Tex McIver? Well, you got to go to the indictment and take a look at all of the charges, because they can be guilty or not guilty on all of them with different sentences. Count 1, murder, guilty, life with or without the possibility of parole. If he's found not guilty, the jury can still consider involuntary manslaughter, which is 1 to 10 years. Count 2, felony murder, same sentence as malice murder, life in prison with or without the possibility of parole. Count 3, aggravated assault. That's 1 to 20 years if he's found guilty. Count 4, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. That is 5 years mandatory, running consecutively to whatever felony he's found guilty of. And count 5, witness tampering. That is 2 to 10 years in prison. So if Tex McIver is found not guilty of murder, that's just the beginning of the story.
Remember the expert from the crime lab demonstrating the weapon and pulling the trigger?
Notice the trigger.
Oops, he's demonstrating it for you on the witness stand. He accidentally pulls the trigger. He says, oops.
The auction.
Not 1 fur for sentimental value. He's prancing up and down talking about the furs for sentimental value.
Speculation. There must have been a second will. Speculation. She must have been getting ready to foreclose on the $350,000. Speculation. They must have been arguing in private. If Mr. Rucker can convince you to speculate about 20 or 30 different things, none of which we've heard any evidence about, then we lose. We are going to vilify Tex McIver. He acted irrationally after his wife died. He was worried about money. He lacks social skills. He looks at another woman. He gets a massage. He's not sentimental about her jewelry and her furs. Because of all those things, by golly, you should feel comfortable finding him guilty of murder.
He wants you to believe that it was an accident. He doesn't really know that much about guns. So he told the police department, I ain't fired that gun in, so long. It was just, it was just on my lap. I was handling it. And it just went off. And you know that he says to a reporter, guns are not my thing. Did y'all see all them guns? I had it here on the table. And all them different revolvers that are just like the gun he used to shoot and kill his wife. Why would he lie about that? It's because he is guilty. He is guilty. Carl, who will stand for the little girl? Who will stand for the little girl who is now dead? Who will stand for the little girl who came from humble means? Who will stand for the little girl who fulfilled all of her dreams? Who will stand for Diane McIver? She knew betrayal, hurt, and pain. When I was a kid, there was this movie with this real famous actor. His name was Richard Gere. It was American Gigolo. Huh? He used to go out and get women to take care of him. Y'all remember that? Spoilers of the Sea. It's a story about a young man and an octopus. The octopus, when he feels threatened, what he does is he releases ink into the water. He makes it real dark and murky, so you can't see. Where's the octopus? Can you find him? There he is. Who will stand for the little girl? Who will stand for the little girl who is now dead? Who will stand for the little girl who came from humble means? Who will stand for the little girl who fulfilled all of her dreams? Who will stand for Diane McIver? She knew betrayal, hurt, and pain.
Fasten your seatbelts, folks. What a day at the Fulton County Courthouse. Just got back. I was down there. Natisha Lance was there. She may join us in just a few minutes. She's working on her story for tonight on the late feed. But what a development. What a development. And for those of you who don't know what it is, like I said, sit down for a second. Take a deep breath. Let me tell you about the note. The jury hits the little button, the blue light goes off, they rush into the courtroom, they get the note from the jury, and it says, question 1, can we find him not guilty of counts 1 through 4 and guilty of count 5? The jury is giving the verdict before they're giving the verdict. This is the first time I've ever seen this in any case I've ever covered, anytime I've been in a courthouse anywhere around this country. Unbelievable. So at this point, it appears that this jury may have reached consensus on, or very close to it, on counts 1 through 4. Let me remind you what those counts are. Count 1, malice murder. Count 2, felony murder. Count 3, aggravated manslaughter, aggravated assault. Count 4, possession of a weapon during the commission of a felony. Those are the 4 big ones. Count 5, that's like witness tampering, that's like time served, probation, that's a throwaway. Tex McIver, if that becomes the verdict, will walk out of that courtroom when and if the jury ultimately delivers their verdict. Now, There was another question, we'll get to that in a minute, but we got to start with that one because it's so huge. My legal dream team here tonight, Prosecutor LaTonya Hines and Defense Attorney Meg Strickler. First question, have you ever seen a jury send out a note like this, where they're basically telling us what the verdict is before the verdict?
I've seen jury notes that say, for example, a trial where it's 8 counts, and they might say, if we find you guilty on one count, what does that do with the other counts? So that kind of thing, which doesn't help any defense lawyer. Hearing that would make me think, oh God, we're going to lose at least on that count, and then ultimately sometimes you can lose on all the counts. So I've seen it happen, but not to this kind of grave.
Or maybe sometimes you've heard them say, do we have to come to a decision on all the counts?
Right.
Or not. And so that's a common one because sometimes they're confused about it.
Yes.
But today, for them to say it that way,
Not guilty,
it
1
kinda,
through 4.
right, and it kind of foretells like what they're thinking. But it could be that they're just reasoning it out, and maybe they haven't already made their decision.
Or they could be
Madam Prosecutor speaking.
Could they be punking Tex McIver and like throwing him a curveball?
No, you know what though?
That
Here's
would
the
be a
thing.
great idea.
Even though we kind of laugh a little bit about it, but the jurors, it is an incredibly hard thing to be
and
a
there's
juror.
no rule book. They don't give you a rule book.
There's no rule book, and they don't have some legal person that they can say, hey, can you just give us a little bit of advice about how this goes or not? They've got to do it all themselves and make these decisions. And the thing of it is, too, they have been sitting there all these days, and then they know that their decision is what determines what happens to the man that they've been watching all throughout this trial.
All right, so let's get a consensus here. So do we believe, and we'll go one at a time, do you believe that that note means that Tex McIver, when they deliver their verdict at whatever point, will be found guilty of counts 1 through 4? Is it what it says it is?
You mean not guilty?
Did I say guilty?
Yes.
I meant not guilty. Thank you, LaTonya.
Freudian.
Words matter. Woo.
Yeah.
Does that mean not guilty? Does that mean that's what's going to happen?
We don't know, and I'm not going to go and say that that's what it means, but it does mean there's some leaning towards it. We don't know until that verdict is actually read.
Like leaning like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or like leaning all the way over?
Well, the problem with juries is you can't, just like LaTonya just said, you really want to be careful reading into either their actions, their
Sometimes we have to
questions.
read between the lines, but I'm just reading the lines themselves.
I'm 100% with you, actually, but you're asking questions of what juries tend to do. We never ever know. But when I read that as a defense lawyer, I'm sleeping well tonight and happy because I'm thinking at the best case scenario, they're thinking about acquitting on those major charges. That's a great day for the defense.
And as a prosecutor, you are concerned when you hear the jury come back like that. It's a little kind of deflating.
And I think a jury knows if they send a note out like that, the reaction that it's going to have from the people who read it, like the lawyers, like the judge, like Tex McIver. So I don't think that they would send out a note like that if they weren't like...
Well, what's shocking
But
too
do
is
you
why so
think that?
fast?
But do you
Why so
think
fast?
that, or do you think that maybe they're just sending it because they're just trying to figure it out, and they're not concerned about what the reaction is to everyone else?
Now, I think what's surprising to me is 24 hours after getting the case.
Less
they're
than 24
Yeah,
hours.
less than even.
Yeah.
The fact that they're asking
Or right at
such
24
an
hours.
important question on the impact of this
But
case
then how
is
do you
scary to me.
reconcile? Then how do you reconcile if they've already made their minds up? I don't think everybody's made their mind up because
no.
you've got the other question, which is, can we go back to the car? And not only can we go back to the car, can we take the gun with us?
All right, that's getting to question number 2, which plays into question number 1 and may tell us exactly what is happening inside that courtroom. I want to get to a couple of comments. We got folks watching tonight. We've got Kevin and Carrie and Dinah and Lauren, of course, Rena, Monica, Kimberly, Sally. Jeannie says, he will get off, I'm afraid. He should be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
That's
This
what
is
I
my
say.
follow-up question. That note, if we read that note for what it is, right, where if we find him not guilty of counts 1 through 4, do we think that includes not guilty of the lesser included involuntary manslaughter?
We have no idea, but as a prosecutor, the hope is no.
I know what the hope is, but let's just trying to read, like if you're a juror and you're writing this out like this, do you think that means when they say count 1, it means the charge and the lesser included of count 1?
I think it means the whole thing.
The whole
I do
thing,
too.
okay.
I do
The whole
too. I
thing.
think it's the whole thing, they're throwing it
Yeah,
out.
just in all honesty, it just means the whole thing.
And that question, like LaTonya said, is something that's showing that they are contemplating all aspects of this case. They also asked for the APD interview late today.
Yeah.
And so that
And
shows.
the emails, which I'm not
and the
quite sure about.
emails.
The emails.
Really important question I have to answer here, and this is from Sandy. Says, if it comes back as not guilty, will the state appeal and attempt to retry? No,
there's
can't
no
do that.
ability
It's
to
called double jeopardy.
Yes.
Who wants to explain it?
Yeah, you can't do that. And the only time you could possibly ever do is if you could say that there was some issue with the jury. There was some type of major tampering with the jury in the
Yeah.
process to do it. But no, once somebody has been found not guilty in the United States of America, you cannot be tried again. You can't have your, what they call, life back on jeopardy again.
But if you're O.J. Simpson, you continue in that world, and then the government's keeping watching on you, and you go to prison. So Tex could look for that
But
for the future.
here's the thing, what you could do, which is mentioning the O.J. Simpson and mentioning Robert Blake, you could have a civil case. You could say, hey,
Who would bring
you
that
gotta-
case? The estate of Diane McIver?
That would be the one who would have the standing to do it.
Yeah.
But you know what? I
don't
don't
think it's
know.
happening.
Not in this
Yeah.
scenario, because I think this is a little politically driven. And so if they do lose, the prosecution loses.
It's done. It's over.
It's
Oh, it's
over.
done.
Finito.
It's over.
And they want to not think about it ever again and just be like, what happened?
wanna move on.
What trial?
But they can be confident that they did their job, which is it is what it is.
Yeah, I
at
don't
this
know.
point.
We'll see. We're not sure
Okay.
who's winning yet.
No.
Let's get to the second question because it really ties into the first question. So the second question they asked is, can we sit inside the SUV again with the gun?
Yeah.
So the first time they did the jury view, the jurors just went down, looked, sat in there, walked around, did their thing. Every juror took about 2 minutes or so. Some sat inside, some did not. Some sat in more than one seat, others didn't. But they want to go back there again with the gun. So let's start here. What does that mean in relation to this first question, which is, can we find him not guilty of counts 1 through 4 and guilty of count 5? And then we all want to see the SUV and we want to have the gun inside the SUV.
Somebody's not completely convinced that counts 1 through 4 should be not guilty. They want to go back in there and have a vantage point to see, to kind of test some of these theories that have been put out here about what actually happened. Whether or not it was an accident, whether or not what he said makes sense, or what the prosecution said makes sense.
I
So
have a
it's
different
kind of like a
flip on it.
battle of the experts, but through the jury doing their own
I
sort
have
of
a different spin on
reenactment.
it.
Go
I
ahead.
think, because you said the cameraman here from 11 Alive sat in the car with the gun, right? He had a
No,
plastic
he
gun.
used his finger.
Oh, he used his finger, but the way he had dictated, he said, well, by sitting there, it really gave me a grave idea of what occurred and may not have occurred. And he had said some things that made me think, using that data from the cameraman, I think that if you think how he acted and how he reacted, the same thing could be said here, where they're trying to exonerate him from counts 1 through 4 by sitting back in with the actual gun. How in the heck is it
So
possible?
just confirming
Yes.
what they're doing.
Yes.
Confirming.
Which
Because
is to say-
when they sat there the first time,
They couldn't-
maybe we couldn't see inside. When I say we, I mean the media that was observing couldn't see exactly what the jurors were doing back there, but the obvious thing to do would be the old finger gun. By the way, can I just, how is this supposed to be a gun? Like, what part of the gun is this? Is that supposed to be the hammer?
So,
Where's
guess
the
it
trigger?
it's sort of the thing.
This really looks more like a gun, right? Why do we do this?
Because it's always like when somebody's being held up, it's like, the
Stick
pretend.
them up?
Yeah.
but this really looks more like a
I
gun.
don't know.
That's over there. Anyway, so now they're going to have the gun, and they had their fingers before. So remember, I think we have the picture here, right? We have the picture.
Yeah, the picture's in there somewhere.
I'll find it.
Okay.
I have this marked into Etna. Here we go. So when they go inside there, folks, remember you've got the dowel that is sticking out the
Yes.
back. So the dowel represents the trajectory of the bullet because it goes through the hole in the front, through the hole in the back, and it lines up and it shows the trajectory of that bullet because bullets travel straight whichever way they're pointed, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So
but they didn't ask for a bag. You're just getting the weapon. So what is it? What else?
It
are they
shows
trying
that
to
it's
figure
just, I'm
now,
assuming,
here's what I
an
think
accident.
they can do.
Yeah.
What they can do is they can sit there
Correct.
and line the gun up
Yes.
With the holes.
with the door closed and figure out from their own perspective which way the gun can or can't be.
And they know how
which
big Tex
expert
is.
should they
Right.
believe.
And Bruce Harvey made a point about the whole, if your arm was bent or not bent, could
Yes.
you be in the car? I think they're going to try some of that also.
And they know how Tex is. They know how big he is. They know how, I mean, we don't have to have science. They know what size his leg is just by guesstimating. And that's all they want to do is sit in there with the gun. But I think that's still a big
But
bonus
I'm
for the
also-
defense.
But I'm also intrigued as to why they want to see the emails. I didn't get.
All right, don't jump ahead yet. We'll get to the
sorry.
emails in a second.
Sorry, Vinny. Sorry, Vinny.
Just jumping ahead.
Sorry, Vinny. Sorry.
Objection. No. I want to get to the emails are even more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I agree
but
with you.
Dinah agrees here. She says they want to lay their hands on the armrest of the door and the door shut.
Yes.
Yep.
To see if it lines up with the trajectory, resting
Correct.
left or right, because there's really no great pictures that they were showing with the door shut, because you
None.
can't do it. It's
None.
hard to get the whole angle. Now, let me go from a legal perspective. Is this problematic? Because basically what we know what the jury's going to do, they're going to sit in there like Tex McIver sat in there and line it up. Is that a problem? Are they doing an experiment, or are they just examining evidence here? What's going on here legally?
Well, good point, because, I mean, just to talk as an appellate lawyer for 5 minutes, there's a lot of holes there. By letting them go back in during deliberations gives more reason, should he be convicted of something that requires lots and lots of prison years, then that will be an appellate issue that will be exhausted beyond bail.
And it's almost like continuing evidence going on
Yes,
too.
yes,
That's a
yes.
huge issue too.
Now, how about this? When the jury goes, if they go tomorrow, and the sheriff has to get the SUV there, but Clint Rucker said it's going to happen. So they get the SUV there, the jury's there. Do they have to do it the same way, where one juror at a time goes up, does their thing by themselves, no talking? Or do all the jurors gather around the SUV
Dangerous.
and deliberate?
Oh gosh,
That's
I think that's very dangerous to
But
do
do you think
that.
it could? I mean,
I don't
this
know.
jury has done things that a lot of juries have not done.
Well, Judge McBurn's
Not
been-
here
yeah.
that we're used to.
Right,
but
right.
Other places, jurors can ask questions and things.
Yes,
I
true.
think that.
How do you think
for
it goes
appellate-
down?
But I do think for appellate purposes, you should not have them probably sitting there
No.
having conversations.
Give them 30
and
seconds each
everything.
in there, something like that,
Yeah.
and not to
Because
interact with each other while they're in there.
Then they're doing more investigation themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also, but what they could also do, and again, I know they can't do the investigation, they're not supposed to do these experiments, but if they've got all these things, they're going to do it, and they do it anyway in the jury room in every case, but we never see it. From my perspective, I think it would be better for this jury to be there all together and be able to discuss it, because whatever discrepancies they have can be argued there, rather than, well, then they get back to the jury room. This is for reaching consensus, okay?
I understand.
I think it's a better road to consensus. Because if they go back to the jury room and they each had their own individual experience in that back seat, one of them can say, well, when I did it, it didn't line up. The other one says, but when I did it, it did line up. And then we're back to like ground zero, square one,
Doesn't
whatever you
matter.
call it.
I think
Yeah.
the judge is going to be real careful with that. He's
got
going to do
to.
one at a time, quietly, with no interactions, probably no discussions, period, till they get back up in the jury room.
All right.
He's got to watch himself.
Yeah,
he can't
because,
give too much.
Because if they get in there and then they start supposing all these
Yes.
different things, all these different scenarios that didn't even get discussed.
So don't leave them alone in the
Unintended.
sally port to do whatever they're going to do. Say, listen, guys, we're going to get, ring the bell or
Go
something.
ahead, go ahead, do your thing.
We'll serve you lunch down here.
But that's what they do in a jury room.
Yes, true.
Yeah,
but that's just
a
a room.
different thing.
And you know what they're doing in the jury room. They're sitting in their chairs and they've got the gun and they're going like
Heck
this.
yeah. Heck yeah, they are.
All right.
But you've
All
seen
right.
the jury rooms in Fulton. They're
I
hot
would
this
be a
morning.
very liberal judge. I'd probably get overturned on a
Yeah,
lot
I
of my
couldn't be a
decisions.
judge. I couldn't be a judge.
You know why? Because I want the jury to find the truth. That's all I want. I want to give them the best opportunity to get to the truth. I don't want to shield them. I believe our
Yes.
system of justice does too much to
Oh,
keep
stop.
the jury away from the truth.
No,
Yeah,
but he's too
but-
prosecutorially oriented. There's this pesky thing called a constitution and our rights
Yes,
that we
but
got to
sometimes
protect.
the truth is somewhere in the middle when you actually
Hey,
do
but
a trial.
you telling me that our founding fathers didn't want the truth found inside those
Yeah, but
courtrooms?
here's the
but-
reality.
You can't handle the truth.
Here's the reality. In a trial, it's not about truth. It's about whether or not the evidence.
Ooh,
It's
this
true.
is- it is true.
It's true. It's true because
That's
how many?
sad.
It is. But it's
true,
This
though,
is
I
our
agree.
justice system, and it's
It's whatever evidence is, because we
Right.
talked about the Emory Hospital part and those things, and there were some pretrial motions that were ruled on that you couldn't get some of this hospital information brought into the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a perfect example of the law and those kinds of things, evidence versus the truth coming in.
or maybe the fact that Texas had other issues with guns.
Yeah, right? Same
Yeah.
thing, yes, a similar transaction.
Anybody remember?
Did that just was
yeah,
ruled out?
I mean, I think that's another thing that maybe if the jurors had heard that, it made them
Oh my
less
gosh,
likely
yes.
to think this was an accident.
It's shocking that didn't come in.
But at the same time, it's understood why it didn't come in.
Why?
By the defense.
Why?
part. Well, because it's more prejudicial than probative.
I don't
maybe?
understand that. Truthfully, on that one, I'm
Now,
prosecutorially oriented.
I don't feel that.
Yeah, but I'm
thinking
saying,
that
why didn't it
that's-
come in? I mean-
I think that was the reasoning.
Yeah.
All right, so emails.
Yes.
They also asked for an email. Oh, wait, we got some breaking news, folks. Natisha Lance is going to join us now, and you know her. She's a member of the Late Fee team. She also used to work with Nancy Grace and worked with me over at HLN on After
don't
Dark.
have a mic
You don't have a
for
mic,
you,
so
so
you have to
speak
speak
Hello.
really loud. All right. So you were in the courtroom when these questions were asked and they were
Yes.
answered and people were reacting. What's the first thing that jumps out that you think the folks at home should know about what happened in that courtroom, what you saw?
The first thing that jumped out is the first question was the first thing that jumped out because it seemed like that really plays to the defense.
Oh, yes.
Plays to the defense. So the defense first said yes, and the judge said, "Do you want me to put an exclamation point on that?" And they
As
said,
the answer to the
as
question.
the answer
Yeah.
to the question.
Can they find him not guilty of 1 through 4 and guilty of 5?
Right, because the judge wanted to give more of an explanation to the jurors, and the defense attorney said, "You can just say yes. You don't have to give all that explanation."
Was the defense kind of like jumping up and down like this at the time when they heard
There was
that?
no jumping up and down, and unfortunately, where I was sitting, I couldn't see Tex McIver's face, but I wish I could have to see what his reaction was. Or
But you saw the jury.
What about the
No,
reaction?
the jury was not
Jury
in
wasn't
the
there
room.
for that
What
part.
about the reaction of the people who were in the courtroom? Did you see any reaction?
There was some shifting in seats. There was, I think people were trying to figure out, what were those first 4 charges, because I didn't know either. I had to look myself, and I was like, oh.
So yesterday was like a packed courtroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
How was it today?
Today, it wasn't as packed today. So today, and you've been in the courtroom, so it's really divided. There is a crack in the middle of the seats, and on one side it is people for Diane, and on the other side is people for Tex. So there's really a division in the courtroom. But today, his sister was there. Her name is Dixie. The masseuse with the boots was there.
Oh.
Annie,
Was she wearing the boots?
Annie Anderson.
She was not
Oh,
wearing the boots.
do her shoes look like they're size 10?
To me, I don't want to speculate,
Oh!
but her feet look bigger than mine.
Okay.
I'll put it that way.
What size are you? Oh, wait. I just put them in my hands. I can't. What size?
I wear a 7, sometimes if it's a pointy toe, an 8.
Okay, so that's...
So they're bigger than that? Okay.
And your feet were bigger than hers?
Show my feet.
That was
Wait,
funny.
your feet were bigger than hers?
No, I don't think my feet were bigger than hers.
Hers
I
were
think-
bigger than yours.
Yeah,
Okay.
her feet were bigger than mine.
Gotcha.
But when the jury did come back into the courtroom was right when the judge was dismissing them for the day. And the second question and the third question, those were things that he couldn't immediately give an answer to. So the defense was a little hesitant about allowing the jurors to go into the car and look at the gun again. But the prosecution had no issue with it. So it sounds like the judge is going to make a decision tomorrow morning to figure out if the jury can do that.
Did the jury want to do it?
Oh, yes.
How could you tell?
Because they nodded their heads. So you were thinking maybe it's one person who is interested in doing that, but the judge said, "I'm not sure if this is something that you guys still want to do. Is this something that you guys still want to do? Get into the car and look at the gun." And all of them nodded their heads.
All of them?
adamantly.
Which is a great thing for the prosecution.
No, I disagree. It's for the defense
I
to show
think
it's a clear accident.
No,
Well,
I
the
think
defense
it's a
was
great
concerned
thing.
about it, though,
Yeah, I
because
think it's
they
a great
said-
thing because it means they're still thinking. I think this helps the prosecution because if they would have said no, we don't need that anymore, and if you answer the first question, boom, we're done. We've already made up our mind.
Yeah, and they also want to see, the first thing that will be queued up for them tomorrow morning is Tex McIver's interview with APD.
APD.
Which is probably going to be, what did he tell them happened?
Yeah, I think that's bad for the defense.
I was handling the gun.
Yeah, that's
and it
bad
went
for the
off.
defense. That's a pro-prosecution. That's not a good one for Tex to watch that interview again. I don't think there's anything good about that
I
interview.
can't get beyond the first question though, but it'll be fascinating.
but-
So the judge also wanted the sheriff to make a decision about the SUV?
Yes, because they have to figure out where it is, bring it from that location, and if that's going to be possible for them to do.
Did the sheriff give an answer before